SVG sets 2 NASCAR records and things get physical on the streets of Chicago. We'll talk about that race and settle the score next on Racin-n-Braisin. Well, hi folks, welcome back to Racin-n-Braisin. I am CJ, a lifelong NASCAR fan and chef, bringing you news and analysis from each race weekend, as well as a couple of tips and tricks from my kitchen to yours. Today, we are going to talk about that Chicago race. SVG did, in fact, set 2 records today with his win. Things did get a little beefy on and off track today. We'll talk about what drivers were involved in that and what was said after the race. And finally, we're going to talk about how my Italian beef went this weekend. I'll give you a couple of tips about how I was able to throw that together for myself here at home. So let's dive right into things and talk about that race. Yes, in fact, SVG did set 2 records this weekend. The first one comes as he was able to sweep the entire weekend, winning the pole for both the Xfinity and Cup race, as well as winning both of those races. That makes him the first rookie to sweep a weekend in the Cup Series. So there's record number 1 for him. Record number 2 with this win now makes him the winningest foreign-born driver in the Cup Series. He didn't really have too much of a challenge at the end, but I thought he was going to have a challenge early on in the day. My pick for the day was Michael McDowell. Mom's pick was SVG. I thought McDowell had the car to contend against Gisbergen there throughout the day. Unfortunately, and something I've never heard of happening, McDowell shredded his throttle cable, and that sent him to the garage. I'm not sure that he ever got back on track. Ended up finishing 32nd after starting on the front row. Definitely hit me hard in the points in the regular season competition. What was once a 15-point lead now turns into a 16-point deficit. The word of the day at Chicago was definitely treacherous, and we saw that play out early on in the race with a lap 4 pileup. Carson Hocevar absolutely smacked the wall, and boy, when Hocevar hits things, he sure knows how to hit them. He moved that wall. He hit it so dang hard. And then broke a whole bunch of stuff, spun out in front of a full field that caused a good 6-7 car pileup there, and actually took out a couple of cars that looked like were going to be contenders early on in the race. Hocevar himself included. He was fast in practice, and unfortunately, his day ended early. That did lead to a red flag about 14 minutes long, and being so early in the race, definitely felt like it took a while for the race to really get going. Once it did, it ran green all the way until the end of stage 1. McDowell won that stage. SVG was right behind him until he pulled off for a pit stop there, whole strategy thing. While they were under caution between stage 1 and stage 2 there, McDowell's team was telling him to stay out on the track and that they were going to try and turn it into a one-stop race. Pretty interesting. Unfortunately, one more caution later, just a few laps after they had restarted stage 2, that's when McDowell had his mechanical issues and cost me big time in the day. The rest of the race was not all that interesting until we got into the final stint with 9 laps to go. There was a late restart there, and that's when the intensity on track actually picked up. Up until that point, there really wasn't much in the way of passing. There were a couple of cars that were able to move forward, but the TV coverage throughout the day didn't really show a ton of the action in the back of the track, if there was any. I even tried searching for a little bit of it on Max through the in-car cameras and wasn't really able to find anything interesting to watch throughout the race. Like I said, it didn't really get good until the last little bit. Then we had a couple of beefs. So let's talk about the beefs that happened on track and who they occurred between. One of which was actually part of the in-season bracket challenge, and that was between Alex Bowman and Bubba Wallace. In that final restart and that last little run to the end there, they were right near each other and battling hard. And for a good 2 to 3 laps, really fighting hard for position there until finally Bowman, let his frustration drive through Wallace maybe. I'm not sure. Could he have given him more room? maybe not. It was towards the end of the race, but nonetheless, left hooks Wallace, and that ends up sending Wallace into the wall and ending his day early. And Bowman ended up with an 8th place finish on the good side of that beef. After the race, I saw Bowman's interview, and he'd said that he thought the beef between the two of them had been done. Apparently, it is not, and was not able to see what Wallace had to say post-race as of yet. I'm sure he's not happy, and I'm sure he's not willing to say too much right now. We'll probably hear more about that later this week. What we will most likely hear more of later this week has to do with beef between Joey Logano and Ross Chastain. After the race, Jeff Gluck was able to catch with his camera that Logano walked right up to Ross Chastain after the two of them got out of the cars, started waving his arms around, pointing fingers, and saying a bunch of stuff with a whole lot of body language behind it. And you could definitely tell that he was upset about something that Chastain did on the track. They definitely got into each other on track, but that was part of like a 5-car tussle. So I wasn't sure if it was anything that Chastain was doing purposely against Logano, but clearly Logano had a problem with it. As he was walking away, Bob Pockrass was able to talk with Logano, asked what was going on. Logano said that Chastain admitted that he wrecked him and feels like he should be fined if he's admitting such things. So that leads us to wonder if we are going to hear something about penalties later this week for on-track incident. We'll find out, maybe some fines, maybe some points, I don't know, maybe loss of position, who knows, but if it is found through some sort of audio, and we know how good the audio is these days at picking up things, Chastain might be in trouble if he actually did admit to wrecking Logano. We'll find out later. Finally, the last beef to talk about here today is a beef that I have as a NASCAR fan with the NASCAR officiating body. With 2 laps to go, we heard about Cody Ware hitting turn 6 really hard and burying his car into the tire barrier. The broadcast showed it. He was stuck. He was not moving. Wasn't trying to make an effort to move the car out of the tire barriers. The leader, SVG, was coming up to the white flag. So, you know, of course, as a fan, I was hoping that NASCAR would throw the caution right away so he could get an overtime finish. Just to make things a little more interesting. It was obvious SVG was going to win at that point had nothing else occurred. Well, after the race, I saw on social media that Cody Ware just absolutely destroyed a brake rotor and went headfirst into that turn 6 tire barrier at 93 mile an hour with no brakes, and immediately got on the radio after he came to an abrupt stop and said, "I need help." How come someone on NASCAR was not monitoring that radio transmission and immediately telling the officiating crew to throw a caution for that? It took 34 seconds for NASCAR to finally wave the caution flag, and by that point, SVG had already taken the white flag and the race was complete. So very disappointing. And that's the beef that this NASCAR fan is having with NASCAR officiating this week. So that's going to lead me into, I think, what's going to be an obvious thumbs up or thumbs down for today's race. Well, yeah, guys, like I said, I think it's pretty obvious. This one's a thumbs down. You guys know me. I'm a cheerleader for NASCAR. I like NASCAR. I'm a lifelong fan. You know, this is my sport. This is the one that I watch and follow intently, week in and week out. I'm looking for the dramas. I'm looking for the storylines. These are the things that keep me interested as a fan and wanting to watch intently, week in and week out. Unfortunately, this week, it wasn't a good product on the track. It had a really slow start to it with that early red flag. Yeah, it was kind of cool to see the pileup, but we've seen that pileup here at Chicago. That's nothing new. Chicago's definitely run its course, and I think we all know that the rumor is not so quiet anymore, that Chicago might be going the wayside and we're going to get San Diego. So, you know, good to see some change of venue, but I don't think a street course is necessarily suitable for NASCAR Cup cars, in my opinion. I don't know. The drivers definitely did not enjoy the cars this weekend. All of them were complaining about how hard this track is to drive. So you would have thought that that would have made for a more compelling race, but it really wasn't. It was hard to pass. There were only a couple of people that could pass, and the broadcast just did not do a good job of covering action throughout the field this time around. The only good racing that occurred was in that final last stint that they had, and even then, it really just wasn't enough to carry the entire race all the way through. Let me know in the comments down below. Leave an emoji of a thumbs up or thumbs down with one or two reasons why you gave the race what you gave it. We'll keep a running tally as the season goes on. When the season finishes, I'll let you know what our ratio of thumbs up to thumbs down for the entirety of the season works out to be. So that's all I've got for NASCAR talk for you today. I do want to talk with you a little bit about how my Italian beef worked out this weekend. If you guys were able to catch the short that I posted earlier today, boy, I had a great looking Italian beef sandwich on deck, ready to go for the start of today's Chicago race. And boy, that was delicious. It was really, really good. Got a couple of pictures here that I'll roll through here for you guys to show you what everything looked like at the end result. The way I tackled it is not the traditional way that a true Chicago Italian beef sandwich is made. Ordinarily, it's a whole roast that gets done in a big, heavy steel roasting pan. And then the beef gets pulled out, cooled completely, sliced super thin, and then cooked a little bit further in the jus before being served on some French bread with some jardiniere. Well, couple of things. Number one, when I went shopping for a top round to use as my roast, I wasn't able to find anything that was really suitable for me. So I had to go with a plan B on what to use for meat for my sandwich. So I decided to go with some chuck that was already cubed up for stew meat. It was a really good price and pretty easy enough for me to manipulate into something that would work for this sandwich. So what I decided to do was break out the Instapot. I salted the beef well in advance and allowed that salt to extract any excess moisture from inside of the beef, open up the pores of the beef and allow the salt to soak into that. And then I patted it dry and got a really good sear in the bottom of the Instapot on the beef. Set aside the beef and then deglaze the bottom of the Instapot with some butter and a really good seasoning blend that I found online when researching what to use for Italian beef sandwiches. I'll leave a recipe for all of this down below. Be sure to check it out. This seasoning blend really made a difference on it. So I allowed that to steep in the butter for about 10 minutes. It browned the butter a little bit. It opened up the aromatics of the seasonings, allowed everything to get really happy together. And then I added the beef back in, put some beef stock over top of it, put the lid on the pressure cooker and let it go for 30 minutes under high pressure. Then I allowed it to release naturally before removing the lid, taking the beef out and shredding that by hand. And then I allowed the au jus in the Instapot to get back to a low simmer and returned that shredded beef into it and allowed it to cook for another 30 minutes in that au jus. And boy, that imparted a ton of flavor into that sandwich. When I put it together, as you guys can see right here, I decided to add some sweet and hot peppers to my sandwich instead of the traditional jardiniere. And boy, that was delicious. The au jus had a very delightful heat on the back end of it that kind of made you craving for more of it. And if that's how the true Chicago Italian beef tastes, then I need to be making a trip to Chicago here soon. Jessica, if you're watching, you'll be seeing me here in the future. And I know that's not your favorite, but I need to try it. So that's how things worked out for my Italian beef sandwich. It was delicious. And like I said, guys, I'll put a recipe for how I did it in the description below. So that wraps things up for this holiday weekend. Be on the lookout for the next preview edition of Racin-n-Braisin, where we'll talk about Sonoma coming up next week on Thursday. All right, guys, that does it for me. Stay happy.